Everything we've been seeing from the monsters in this season is genuinely terrifying, and it's becoming more and more obvious that the monsters are obviously not attacking these people out of instinct, but that they are following a strategy that's been designed by whoever it is that's controlling these monsters. And this is something that we explicitly see in this scene, for example, with Boyd and the monsters.
Kill me! But you leave her alone!
I'm not gonna kill you, Boyd. That would be no fun.
You don't fucking break me.
That's what she said.
You don't fucking break me!
This scene shows exactly what I'm talking about, because in this same episode, we got very, very clear proof that these monsters don't have telepathy, they don't have a hive mind, and they don't have omniscience, because the grandma monster had to manually look for Julie and Ethan after they left the house, which means they cannot read minds and they don't have telepathy, and obviously they're not all seeing either, because she literally could not see where Julie and Ethan were hiding. It's just common sense. And we also see these monsters communicating through their screeches very, very clearly in this episode, meaning that they don't have a hive mind. This logically means that whoever it is that told the cowboy about Boyd saying this place cannot break him is a totally different being from the monsters themselves.
Destroying that box isn't going to end their suffering. Let it go, Boyd. If they don't die today, they'll just die tomorrow.
The monsters forcing Boyd to watch as they tortured Tian Chen was a direct response from the entity in retaliation for Boyd killing Smiley and smashing the music box. It's because of Boyd doing these things that the entity realized that it desperately needed a stronger strategy to break these people as fast as it possibly can, because Boyd, he's repeatedly shown that he is very close to actually finding answers and defeating the entity itself. And everything that Boyd has been doing since his arrival into the town genuinely scares the entity, but at the same time it also genuinely excites him, because it's never encountered anybody who was quite as strong-minded and determined to persevere no matter the circumstances as much as Boyd is doing.
They used to shriek. All night long, they'd shriek. That all stopped once we got the talismans. Then they started to whisper. I always wondered about that.
When I was in that chamber, that thing that was talking to me, telling me to give up, whatever it was, it sure as hell wasn't my wife. So what are you?
And this is part of why the entity has such a strong fascination with Boyd. He was the one who found the talismans to begin with, and it was because of this that the entity was forced. Boyd forced this thing to upgrade the monsters, because otherwise they would not be able to get to the people at all. And this just shows Boyd's presence in general has had a profound impact in this world. He's possibly the first person who has ever killed a monster to begin with, and we saw the entity desperately trying to manipulate Boyd into not destroying the music box, which was obviously it was a bunch of bullshit. But what we saw as a result of this is that the entity really struggles to manipulate Boyd as an individual, because Boyd easily realized there's no way his wife would be saying the things that the entity was saying while it was using her face. And I obviously agreed with that. I mean, have you seen the things that Abby was saying to Boyd? He's obviously right. This is not his wife. It's just common sense. But as a result of what happened with Abby, the entity realized it cannot get to Boyd directly. So it's decided using the people around him to try to break him is the only way it can possibly succeed.
No! Look at him.
You were in the barn with her. How are you still alive?
They wanted me to watch.
The monsters forcing Boyd to watch as they tortured Kenny's mom was really the first big milestone of the entity's new strategy to break Boyd. But the entity already knew in advance that this alone would not be enough to break Boyd's resolve. That's why we saw the entity had already planned for Tabitha coming back to the town. And we know conclusively this is the case, because the monsters had already set up a trap for the ambulance before it arrived into town. And obviously that means they knew they were coming. The writers directly specified through Randall's dialogue that this was the one night where the monsters were not following their usual routine. And obviously that's because the monsters needed Boyd Randall and Jim Matthews to feel safe enough for them to make a run for the ambulance. They needed Boyd to abandon Randall because him saying Boyd abandoned him affects his perception as being a moral leader in this community. Because now everybody's thinking, if it was me in that position, Boyd would have abandoned me. And that obviously destroys Boyd's legitimacy while also serving the purpose of causing instability in the town. It's absolutely genius from the entity. It's an amazing plan.
Daddy, are you there? Why did you let Mommy go? Why did you want her to die? You should be watching Julie and Ethan.
Jim Matthews, your wife shouldn't be digging that hole, Jim.
And what we see here is that the entity needed Jim Matthews at the ambulance because it guarantees that Boyd would abandon Randall in favor of not leaving Julie and Ethan as being orphans. The only reason Jim was even there to begin with is because of the voice on the telephone telling Ethan about Tabitha being at the ambulance. Like, come on. What's happening here, man? It's absolutely insane. And it's because of the telephone voice using his dead baby's voice to threaten Jim's children, as well as blatantly claiming that he wanted Tabitha to die, which is obviously false, as Jim has risked his life many times to save his wife. Every sign shows that this voice is clearly evil. This is important because the voice on the radio in season 1 also used this same tactic of threatening Tabitha to get a reaction from Jim Matthews. And remember, the house collapsed on top of Jim Matthews directly because he went to try to save Tabitha after the threat on the radio call. So it already knows by threatening his family, it can always get a predictable response from Jim Matthews.
She was the one who had been chosen to free the children. I guess you've been chosen now too. How did you get out?
Because the voice told Ethan about Tabitha's arrival and the fact that the monsters clearly had already set up a trap for the ambulance, all the evidence shows Tabitha's exit and arrival was planned by whoever's controlling the monsters. And the monsters completely ignoring Tabitha and Victor's dad, despite them being chained up and knowing she was coming back to town, also directly means that any information Tabitha has, which includes everything she saw in Victor's mom's drawings and everything about freeing the children in the lighthouse, all of that information is of absolutely no threat to whoever's controlling the monsters, because the entity knew she was coming back, but it still prioritized breaking Boyd by making him abandon Randall over silencing Tabitha and Victor's dad. Like, come on. It's obvious. This entire situation with Tabitha is absolutely huge in understanding what the entity's strategy actually is, because it shows just how far ahead the entity is planning his strategies to destroy the people of this town. And it's absolutely terrifying because this it's absolutely amazing. These plans are incredible. We saw at least 4 different traps coming together in this one episode. The first is forcing Boyd to abandon Randall, but torturing him just enough to traumatize the people of the town, therefore making the town more unstable, while also forcing Boyd to abandon Randall, which contributes to the entity's plan to break Boyd as an individual. It's incredible, man. The third trap is the entity bringing Tabitha back to town. Proves even if you get out, the entity can still drag you back in at any time, meaning you'll always live in fear of getting dragged back into Fromland. The fourth trap is that the cop shooting this chick in Colony House might have been planned as well, because we see this monster specifically moving into this position right before the cop shoots the girl through the window. And this one, it's actually insane to think about, but you need to remember that it's only because of the cop shooting this girl that Fatima was able to feed her demonic baby to begin with.
What they did to Randall. Why'd they leave him alive? Why not just kill him? Everybody here just talks about how afraid they are of dying. Well, I don't think that's the worst thing that can happen to you here.
What we see in this season is that the scope of the entity's manipulation is absolutely gigantic and looks more like a spiderweb with many interconnected points. Fatima's demon baby by itself serves the purpose of breaking Boyd and also breaking the community by destroying a pillar of Colony House, i.e. Fatima herself, while also breaking both Fatima and Ellis individually. It's similar to how Boyd leaving Randall but keeping him alive and disfiguring him serves as 1. A reminder not to help Boyd fight the monsters because 2. Boyd could abandon you at any point, and 3. It reduces everyone's trust in Boyd's leadership, while 4. It also serves the purpose of breaking Randall's will, and 5. It also reduces Randall's will to fight back in general. Like... Oh man, the strategy it's employing is absolutely incredible, man.
They never run. It's like they're taking their time because they know there's only so many places we can go.
The game here is rigged.
The point I'm ultimately making here is that the strategies being employed by the entity are incredibly complex, far beyond anybody in the town can realize, and it's all about breaking the people's will to fight back and breaking their will to look for answers, and especially breaking Boyd's will in particular. It's obviously not a coincidence that the demon baby was placed in Boyd's daughter-in-law specifically rather than any of the other dozens of women in this community. But make no mistake, despite everything we are seeing here, the entity is clearly not all powerful. The entire reason for this elaborate strategy is because the entity knows that the people have a very real chance of killing him, and that's because of the main man, Boyd. He killed Smiley and smashed the music box, and that was a shocker even for the entity itself. That's why it's doing everything it possibly can to keep these people from looking for answers. But because its power is finite and it's literally feeding from the people's despair,
Plants keep dying. It's like they're growing in poisoned soil. If everything that survived the storm is rotten, Boyd, we're out of food.
There's enough food here to feed everybody in the entire town.
The game here is rigged.
It needs to keep them alive while preventing them from finding answers at the same time. That's the reason why they were given food immediately after they started running out of things to eat. But it's also the same reason Dale was sent into the wall while Tabitha wasn't. It wants them to believe it's possible to escape but be too depressed and unsure of the outcome to ever actually manage to achieve anything in this land, because that way the entity guarantees that it's going to remain fed and happy.
This fucking place fucking makes you think that you're doing the right thing. It takes it away like it's feeding on your pain. You want my pain? My fucking pain? You want my fucking pain? Come on, get it!
Due to Boyd killing Smiley, killing the music box, and finding the talismans, and then directly declaring 2 different times that the entity will not break him, it feels a sort of competitive desire to prove him wrong by winning the game. That's why Boyd is at the center of all these strategies, from the ambulance to the barn, and obviously with his demonic grandson growing in Fatima's belly. All of this ties back to Boyd one way or another, because the entity will not be fulfilled if he breaks everyone's resolve except for Boyd's. It needs that satisfaction. It needs to prove itself by breaking him specifically above everyone else. And it's really because Boyd completely changed this town in a way nobody else ever has. And ultimately, the entity is so obsessed with breaking Boyd because he represents what makes humanity so fierce in general, an unwavering will to just keep fighting against any obstacle, no matter how improbable winning actually is. Boyd's character is ultimately about self-sacrifice. That's why he's the perfect soldier. He just keeps getting back up again and again and again and again, and that's exactly why the writers made him the protagonist in a story about fighting a creature that feeds off of pain and despair. Maybe what they're going for is that Boyd is actually the entity's worst nightmare. Someone whose resolve and will to fight can never be broken.